And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. So, to start off our topics today, I'm sure you're familiar with the company of Amazon, known for selling for their e-commerce platforms, selling a lot of electronics, a lot of goods online. But with technology comes with many dilemmas, especially for a consumer. If you're going to buy online, how do you decide which products to purchase? Now, obviously, there are many sellers online that sells the same products with different branding. So how do you decide which one to purchase? Is brand A better than brand B, or whichever, or if you have many more choices? Now obviously we've come to rely on one of the key features, which is our main topic today, regarding the product reviews. Now obviously the product reviews has been a staple not just for Amazon but for many other e-commerce platform. Now the main issue here is that the reliability of those reviewers per se, and in particular Amazon, based on the article, have to take had take down or had took down, forgot, the 5-star rating reviewer. So what led to this point? Let's take a closer look. So as you can see here, so Amazon had to take down the reviewer, not just any reviewer, but that their top reviewers, because of fraudulent practices. Now, they've been making tens of even thousands of product reviews, actually 20,000 product reviews. And, the Financial Times investigated this issue and they were surprised to find out. An example of this is, what's the name here? Justin Fryer, who is a top reviewer in the United Kingdom, was sought to have been fraudulent in terms of his reviews, meaning in exchange for, 5-star review, there's a services rendered in a sense. What do we mean? So in terms of giving free product, that's one. Also, obviously giving a over glowing review, and to the point of even getting some extra payment. So you get paid for doing the review. Now obviously if you are Amazon, this is not a practice that you are, what do you call this, that's something that they allow. This is not one of their policies. And how does this came about? Now obviously, is it the fault of the reviewer? Yeah, you could say that, but again, it has to, both parties to be working in tandem, meaning the seller as well as the reviewer. Obviously, if you're the seller, your primary goal here is to sell as many products as you can. In particular, if you're a startup company, you're competing with several other sellers here. So how can you compete with those companies that are already doing well? Now, obviously, on their part, one of their key strategies in order to compete is obviously to do some shady mid gray area strategies that would compel customers to see, if they see a glowing review, even a 5-star review, then they might consider purchasing that product per se. Even I would even consider that, but obviously, not just in Amazon, locally we have Lazada, Shopee, and so forth. One tends to lean towards that has a good review or even a great review over versus there's no review. But obviously, that is subjective because it can be manipulated, like the case here is. And as I mentioned, this was reported by the Financial Times, as I mentioned, early in August. And obviously, the fake reviews is not just an isolated issue and has been rampant for many, many years. And according to the statistics here, 58% of products on Amazon in the United Kingdom have fake, not fake products, but they have fake reviews, meaning whether they're bought, embellished, and so forth. So how do you know now which which one to trust. Is the product reliable? Is the review reliable? And so forth. So this can be confusing, especially if you're a consumer that, especially with the pandemic, people are stuck at home, working from home. So they have to buy their products online. It's more convenient, obviously, and people are apprehensive going out and buying their products. And it's not just the top reviewers is the problem here. On the same related topic, Amazon is filled with fake reviews, reviews galore. So it's not just the top reviewers that are problematic in the for Amazon. It's also everyone else. Well, not majority, but there's a big portion, as I mentioned earlier. And obviously here, if you're a customer, is the feedback reliable? Can it be trusted? And obviously, if this is going to be a commonality in the future and moving forward, then how can people trust the product that you're selling? Now, obviously, this goes back to Amazon's policies. What can they do to protect the interest of the consumers? Now, obviously, there are bad actors, as mentioned, getting paid for positive reviews, and obviously getting click farms for outvote negative reviews. So there are manipulative ways to improve the credibility of said product, but it can go either way. Now, one of the key points here, as mentioned, so it's not just the top reviewer that are getting paid in exchange of money, as well as for for every positive review they get $6. So it can be a lucrative job if you're a reviewer and you get to post hundreds or even thousands of positive reviews and get paid along the way. Now, obviously, the fake reviews have boosted the unsafe product. So obviously, Amazon has to be a major component here. How do you protect the interest of your consumers here? And what's amazing here is that Amazon is known for their advanced technology, for their machine learning tools to understand what the customer behavior is, what their preference are, what products they interest in. But when you talk of protection here, how come they're having a difficulty? What do you call this? They're having a difficulty negating the fake reviewers here. I think that's something that they need to invest in heavily, because personally, if I buy things online, I tend to only purchase items that are considered affordable. If it's in the hundreds or even thousands pesos, if it's ranging from 10,000 and above, I tend to look elsewhere, go to the actual shop or go to a store to purchase a more expensive item, because that's a big risk on my part if you're going to buy something that expensive and you can't trust the review there, or you can trust the seller if the actual product is what it's supposed to be. Anyway, continuing. So shifting to gaming. Now, for those who are gaming aficionados, now there's been good news the whole this coming holiday with the soon to be released PS5, and then there's also the Xbox Series X and Series S. It's a confusing modeling with Xbox, but the next generation consoles are coming up. And guess what is Nintendo is doing now? They're not, well, there were rumors that they're going to plan and release a new console, next generation, a Nintendo Switch Pro, but that's just rumors here, so we have to wait and see. But for those who are not familiar, Super Mario the game, or Mario, is being celebrated its 35th anniversary. So the game and Mario is already 35 years old. Okay, I'm older than Mario now. Anyway, so what are they doing in terms of celebrating the anniversary? So they're doing it in two ways. So they're releasing a Game & Watch. For those who are not familiar, so it's a portable device similar to what a Nintendo Switch is. It's even smaller, but it's, when I played it, it's only black and white. It's very rudimentary, similar to how a family computer was, but portable. So let's take a look here. Where is it? Yeah. You can see it here. Yeah, there you go. So this is what a Game & Watch or Super Mario Game & Watch would look like. Okay, so in celebrating the 35th anniversary, so they're going to release games. So there's one more we'll discuss in a bit. But as you can see here, it's a very small device, very rudimentary in its seat, but it's the nostalgia. Sorry. So it's the nostalgia in being able to play older games, right? And in particular, being able to play the original Super Mario game. And I'm sure many of you are interested to find out and where to buy and so forth. And even I am interested, but when are they going to release it? So it's sometime later in November. So early November, I think, second week. It's the 13th. Yeah, November 13th. So as mentioned, that's a Game and Watch. So the difference here, it's full colored LCD. So it's much better than the original Game and Watch. So that's something to look forward to. So what's included in the Game and Watch is the game itself, Super Mario Brothers, and it's also included the Super Mario Brothers, The Lost Levels. Okay, and also there's another game, the Game and Watch, Ball That Stars Mario. Okay, so it's very interesting here. So yeah, it mentions here it retails for $50. So around 2,500 pesos. So it's somewhat affordable. So if you're a Nintendo fan, that's something you would like to consider and purchase later on. Okay. So it's not only that, they're also releasing a game, not just any game, the 35th anniversary Super Mario Brothers game. So what is the game all about? So if you've been playing in other consoles, Nintendo 64, Wii U, I think, I forgot what are the previous games, but they're going to release 3 games that you can download and play in your Nintendo Switch. Okay, so let's take a closer look here. So as you can see here, there are games that you can play here. So you have Super Mario Brothers, the multiplayer game, and other remastered classic games here. Now, one of the key features that's going to be showcased here is the Super Mario 3D All-Stars Collection. So meaning that's Super Mario 64 that was released 1996. You have Super Mario Sunshine, which was released in 2002, and Super Mario Galaxy, which was released in 2007. So meaning if you have Switch consoles here, you can download it later this year. Now, obviously, this is exciting news, and that would only retail, I think, for $60. $59? 69, I forgot. $69. No, 69, $59, sorry. But one of the key issues here, I think there were some negative, backlash from some of the online community based on what the strategy of Nintendo is here. Based on the reports, they're going to release it on a limited run. Okay? So whether on a hard copy, you buy the game itself, or you buy it in their eShop. The problem here is, what's their strategy? Why are they limiting it? I think it would only run up to next March. So after March, they will discontinue the offering anymore. Which is kind of ironic because based on their other titles, it's still in their eShop. So anytime you want to purchase their games, you simply download it and buy it. Then you can enjoy and play the game. And some have been speculating because of a simple strategy to create, what do you call this? To create demand, because there's a scarcity, meaning after a certain period, it will be gone forever, which is kind of intuitive, right? If you want to generate more sales, more revenue, you leave it as is. But this is Nintendo. It's their strategy that they want to employ. So we have to wait and see if people would really flock to the stores and buy it once it's released. And would it be the sales that they're expecting? Tens of even millions of dollars. So we have to wait and see. Now, I'm still hesitant whether I want to buy uh, the games here, but something to consider later on. But if There you go. And we're back. Sorry for the technical difficulty. Second week in a row having technical difficulties. It's a never-ending saga. Anyway, what was I talking last? Yeah, continuing with the games. Now, last week we've been discussing about the manipulative nature of EA games. In particular, the worst game ever conceived, worst rated, obviously not conceived, but the worst game rated ever, which is Madden 2021. Guess what? They're not yet done, digging themselves a hole here. In particular, obviously the game is one of the main issues. If you can't produce a solid game right off the bat, maybe you need time to polish it, so that when you release a game, you're asking people to pay $60 or even $70, people's hard-earned money, and then you expect them that there are a lot of bugs, there are a lot of issues. So why would people, patronize it, right? Anyway, another issue that's been cropping up is another game, which is UFC, which EA owns. I think the game is UFC 4. Yeah, that's the name of the title, right? So it's been riddled with a lot of bugs and issues, but that's beside the point. The game itself has issues on its own, but that's not the main problem here. Guess what? When you paid for a full game, you're going to experience a full-scale online advertisement. So during gameplay, when you're encountering, let's say, a cutscenes of sorts, so they will introduce a advertisement, a full blatant image of an advert. Now, what image is that? So I don't know if you're familiar with the TV series that is released in Amazon Original. It's called The Boys. So I haven't seen that, so you can check it out. And during the game, it occupies almost the entire screen, 90% of the screen here. And it's one of those things that EA tries to see if they can get away with it, right? Especially with their releasing unfinished game, and then the manipulative loot boxes, and now just to earn extra income, revenue, whatever you want to call it, getting advertisements, ads, and then shoving it to the customers or to the gamers gaming experience, so which kind of disrupts the flow. So let's take a look here. Yeah, this is what I meant. So EA is apologizing for putting the full screen in-game ad on UFC 4. Okay, so this is what you can see here. Also, you're playing the game, and you can see a full blatant advertisement, Amazon Original. Watch it on Prime Video on September 4th, right? If you're playing this game, it's a terrible experience. You're allowed to have advertisement if you're playing a free game, right? Typically on mobile games, right? Which is, you're okay with it. Right? You're playing a free game, so they can, advertise in that game. But in this case, you're playing a full-fledged game, and then they have the balls to, advertise, and not advertise in the right sense, that it won't be too intrusive here. And they're just saying that they understand the negative feedback, that they are apologizing for making that mistake, but it didn't happen by accident, if you think about it, right? These are decisions that are made by top management, right? Obviously, their main goal here is to generate as much revenue as they can, at any cost, at the expense of the cost of the gamers' experience. I don't think so, right? And if you notice, if the gamers did not, gave a negative feedback, or there was a backlash, EA would continue this. And if you notice, their strategy is 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Similar with their other strategies, right? They're always trying to test the waters, see what consumers or gamers in this case, how would they react. And obviously, based on the Reddit post, it got 100,000 upvotes based on the negative feedback that it generated, right? And what's interesting here, one of the studies, so it did not happen by accident. So obviously, every game that is being released, critic reviews the game, user reviews the game, right? After a month, after the month it was released, after it was reviewed already, what did they do? That's when the time that they implemented the in-game advertisement, right? They turned on the ad placement. So meaning they could have disabled it, but chose to turn it on so that they can, generate revenue from the advertisement. Right? How manipulative can that be? So I haven't been playing, EA games for quite some time. It's not just the games are terrible. If the games were great, that's another thing. But it's getting worse and worse every year that they release a game, right? I think with the exception of FIFA, but again, FIFA, playing those games with the what do you call this? The loot games that you play, you have to purchase the card so you can improve the statistics of your players and improve and so forth. So we have to wait and see. Anyway, so shifting now to food. So after gaming, who doesn't love food here, right? Now, obviously, speaking of food, people's preferences have shifted dramatically, especially this year, right? People used to purchase food online. That is some of the times, but not all of the time. They go out, eat at restaurants, fast food, whatever, right? But with the pandemic that's been happening, people's preferences have shifted. They are stuck at home, prefer to stay indoors rather than go outside. So, what's the restaurant? What can they do, right? And one of the fast food giants here, Burger King, is taking a new approach here, a touchless approach here. So let's take a look at what are they planning to do. So here, so their goal here is to, their goal here is to go touchless, right? Meaning they're incorporating new technology so that people would be encouraged, right? If they do go out, that when they visit the fast food chains here, that they can feel safe, right? So how does the touchless experience begin? Obviously with the redesign of the site itself. So it would look totally different from what we're accustomed. Typically, there's the store itself, there's the dine-in. Typically it has maybe 1 floor or 2 floors for some. And then there's the drive-through area, right? For people on the go, can't stay long and so forth, right? So they're making permanent changes, which is good news for Burger King lovers. Hopefully this can be implemented here also in our backyard, right? So let's take a look here. Yeah, so this is what the new design would look like. So it's very interesting. So let's go to the details here. So they're going to need less footage here, which is space savings if you think about it. So it would only require 60% less of the actual square footage. As you can see here, you don't need a large footprint here. So you can see it has two floor design. Okay, if you notice, the ground floor consists only of the drive-through for takeouts, drive-through and so forth, right? And then you have delivery drivers also, so it's somewhat of an express lane if you're in a toll expressway, something like that. And then there's a walk-up window for takeout. Now, if you notice, there's a shaded outdoor. Let me see if you can. There you go. So you can see here, there's a shaded portion here. So if you're not inclined to dine inside, you could still eat at the facility or at Burger King. You can just park your cars there, and they're incorporating solar panels to generate more electricity and save fossil fuels, right? So I think this is something that companies, not just restaurants but other companies, have to start innovating and find better ways how to capture the market or regain the trust of the consumers. Now obviously it's not because of their fault, but the apprehension of if people are in proximity to one another, will they contract the virus and so forth, and that's going to take some time, maybe even years before people can say that I think we can see each other face to face, that close of a proximity here. And it's not just the fast food that we're talking here. Now obviously other industries has to shift their strategies as well, and one of the such strategies is in the grocery chains in the United States. And obviously the preference, as I mentioned earlier, has shifted dramatically. So people's preferences, whether buying online, eating at home and so forth. So how do you get them to go out? Obviously if you can guarantee or close to guarantee the safety of any individual visiting your stores or restaurants and so forth. So how can they do that? Now, for grocery chains, they're trying to experiment with new technology. Obviously, the way to go is using better technology here. Okay, so the shift of online grocery is the first one, but it's not just the online grocery experience, but obviously people's preferences still would like to visit the store, right? Especially in particular buying products. Even during the pandemic, a lot of people still prefer to go to the stores and buy the physical product for whatever reasons. Now, could be we're used to it, it's a habit that's hard to break, and you know, you get to choose the products that you want. You're comparing, you're looking at different products. So maybe we're not yet at that point that when you're buying online, you know, one item at a time, it's easier, but you're trying to purchase a lot of items at the same time, it gets confusing. That's why the grocery experience is totally different from any other experiences when we buy items or products. So here's an example here. So how do they make the contactless technology? So we have an example here. So one grocery chain, Giant Eagle, is providing a checkoutless counter, which is, you know, I think that's something that everyone should look forward to, and all grocery stores should be implementing, right? So how are they going to do that if they're going to, you know, implement a checkoutless counter? Now, obviously, you have to incorporate technologies that can scan the products that's inside your cart, okay? Or like how Price Chopper is doing is, you have an app, you install it in your mobile phone or any tablet, and then you scan the item, and then it automatically adds the item, so you know how much to pay, and you can pay using your credit card or debit card and so forth. And then Wegmans is another grocery chain, is using self-checkout now. Now, obviously, self-checkout is you don't have to interact with a cashier anymore, so you can do this at your own leisure. And I think other countries are already implementing. I think Japan has done this before. So if you have a debit card of sorts, yeah, debit card, or I forgot, a Suica card, you can use that as well. Then once you swipe it, then it will deduct the amount that you have purchased. And I think that should be the trending moving forward. It's not just because of the pandemic, but it provides more convenience, because one of the main issues when you're going to a grocery stores is the long queue when, you know, about to pay for the products, right? Especially in SM, it's a terrible long line, as well as in Robinsons and just in any grocery stores, right? The queue for the cashier takes a really long time. Now, is there a way to reduce it? I think checkoutless counter is the best way to go. Now, obviously, you need better technology and the adoption of your consumers as well. I think Amazon had tried to implement this. I think that I saw one video before, I think on Linus Tech Tip, wherein he went to Seattle. I think it was an Amazon retail store, wherein he went in, he grabbed the product, and it automatically deducts it. So you can go out, swipe your card, swipe your QR code, I think, with your smartphone, then you can go out. So no one is checking on you, guarding the products there. So they trust the technology to do the job for you. So no matter what movements you're doing, so it has multiple cameras or infrared cameras all over the ceiling, so it's keeping track of all the people there. But obviously, it's going to be costly if you're going to do this in a large scale scenario. So, you know, we have to wait and see. But the question here is, would other grocery stores implement this or adopt this new technology? Now, obviously, the technology is not going to be cheap. Obviously, whether it's checkoutless or using an app, you know, or scan, you know, you're going to invest heavily. Whether, especially, I think the push cart is another technology wherein it can scan automatically your items that you're buying, and you know, going to cost millions or even tens of millions. Now, obviously, the big grocery chains can afford this, but how about the small grocery stores on the small scale or medium scale? Would they be inclined to do this? Now, obviously, some of them would be apprehensive, right? Because in terms of return on investment, it takes longer and it's going to be costly, so why even pursue it? But obviously, at the end of the day, if you want to compete, especially now and with the trend of shifting, if you want people to come back and, you know, buy items at your store, you have to bring something or value to them that, you know, you can be comfortable going back to grocery shopping. I miss going to the grocery stores, doing the typical stuff, buying items. And if I don't have to fall in line, once I pick my items, I can push the cart outside, go to the parking lot, and then go home. And that would be the ideal scenario here. If those grocery stores can do that, I think that would be a big milestone here, right? Anyway, so continuing with technology now, I think we haven't heard from Huawei for quite some time now, I think, right? Because of the ban issue that was implemented by Trump, by the US government, on collaborating from US companies with transacting with Huawei company in terms of the 5G, in terms of the chipset, so they can't produce any more flagship mobile phones, and I think their supplies is going to run out by later this year. So is it doomed for Huawei? Well, not according to their chairman Guo Ping. And obviously they understood, or he understood, that there are certain difficulties, but what their goal here is, they're in it for the long haul. So what are their strategies to combat this? Now, in terms of their mobile phone, now obviously if they can find a supplier that would supply them, then good for them. But the main problem that they have is, in the China market, they could use their own OS. I think they call it the HuaweiOS, or the Huawei Mobile Services, right? Which caters to 600 million users, which is fine, right? But the problem lies is once they try to extend their reach and sell to other regions, to other markets, wherein lies the problem. Because for the rest of us, if you're not an Apple user, you're an Android user, right? So you rely heavily on Google's Android, what do you call this? Google Apps. So what can Huawei do here? Are they at a loss here? Is there no hope? Well, they're fighting back. So they're planning, that's actually planning, they're developing a third app, a third OS, not app, third OS that would compete against Google's App Store. Okay, so meaning in the very near future, which they're not, they're not that far away, maybe in terms of months or even years. So let's take a look here. So how are they fighting back? So they have already deployed a OS, as I mentioned, probably by end of the year. Okay. Now, obviously, based on what the chairman was said, Guo Ping is stating that they're not wasting an opportunity, even though they're in a crisis, right? Obviously, they're being complementary to Google here, stating that they want to rekindle the relationship if they were to be allowed to, but if not, then they have to chart their own path. What do I mean? Meaning they have to create their own. They'll be forced. They are forced to innovate their own products, meaning not just creating hardware, but in terms of software development as well, which is what they're doing here, right? And as I mentioned, so they're investing heavily on their high silicon technology so that they can not just provide the hardware as well as the software component, right? And it's not just the software that they're having trouble. So what if you are able to create the OS system for Huawei, right? It's the development of the apps itself, right? Similar how Google started with their Google apps, as well as in Apple App Store as well. And one of the key alternatives that Huawei is now able to offer is the Google Maps, right? Many of us, when we travel or travel locally or abroad, that we heavily rely on Google's map to direct us in terms of if you're looking for a place to visit, looking for a specific location, it will direct you, right? And they have now created an alternative to this. What did they call it? Yeah, it's called Huawei App Gallery. So it's a very potent alternative. So how did this came about? So obviously it's a competitive alternative to the Google App Store now. It's not just the Huawei app that's being developed here. There are other developers that are being encouraged to develop the platform here. So it was introduced in the IFA Electronics in Berlin, Germany. So they're focusing, obviously they still have a strong foothold in the European customers, that they are reassuring that the phones that you have bought in the present and even in the future are still going to work properly. So I think they're biding their time right now in terms of developing the app a strong app that can compete with Google App Store, right? And as of right now, the App Gallery is now considered the third largest app marketplace behind only the Google App Store and Apple App Store market. So they have already overtaken Amazon's App Store, which is, lagging behind. So what's interesting here is their App Store is introducing 5,000 new apps. So meaning this is looking even more promising. So especially if you're a Huawei user. So we have to wait and see, but can always look positive. And right now they have 33 million active users monthly. And in terms of worldwide active users, they have 400, roughly almost 500 million worldwide. So in terms of global registered development or development team, they have roughly about less than 2 million. So there's a lot of people, uh, trying to create apps for that particular segment. And what does this indicate? Obviously, the way to go in terms of creating the App Store here is with the help of one of the more popular navigation apps. I don't know if you're familiar with TomTom Go Navigation. So let's see here. So TomTom Go Navigation is one of the more popular maps apps in the market. Now, obviously, they provide a more comprehensive, more detailed information, even though if you're offline. But obviously, at a trade-off, you have to pay for their services. Now, obviously, if you're travel a lot, I think that's a good investment that you can use, whether you subscribe to their 1 year, 6 months, or even monthly subscription. So it depends in terms of your usage here. And they're working with Huawei to develop an app here. Now, if that turns out well, then more competition is always better for the consumer. We have more choices, and Google will be forced to even innovate further with their technology. And at the end of the day, consumers win-win here. Anyway, I'm sure Google is a little bit concerned, right? I'm sure behind the scenes, they would have preferred, talk to the president, Donald Trump, that, why not let Huawei, let us install our app store in their mobile phones, right? Because you're generating millions, even billions of dollars here. But again, this is how it played out, so we have to wait and see what happens next. For some updates, now we've been discussing also regarding Apple's situation for quite some time, right? It all started with the issue with Epic in their App Store, right? For charging them the 30%. Now, obviously, Epic is a big giant gaming developer, the creators of the Unreal Engine. So a lot of developers are depending on the engine itself to continue to prosper in the Apple iOS or in the App Store market, right? So it's Epic who's against Apple. Then you hear Microsoft and Facebook regarding the cloud gaming apprehension of Apple, because they don't get to control what's the content there, and they don't get a cut on every game that's being released. So who's next? It's now other countries are now stepping in. So here we have an article, developers from Japan, which is the epicenter of gaming for many developing games, are getting scrutinized. They're asking for the government, the antitrust watchdog to take a look with this situation. Now, obviously, a gaming company may be limited in terms of its leverage to deal with Apple, maybe with the exception of Amazon. But if a government were to step in and to regulate how Apple conducts its practices in terms of charging a 30% fee, but what fee are they charging it for? Is it for the protection of the consumer, but you're limiting the market of what types of apps are being implemented here? And it's now the creators are breaking their silence with the Apple issue here. And one of the main what do you call this? What contending here is the inconsistencies, right? They create rules and practices, so to speak, and it's not consistent. They make exceptions with the case of the 30% fee that they charge to every developing game or app. But for Amazon, because they want to attract the customer base that Amazon has, they're willing to lower the cost a bit from 10 to 20. So, where's the consistency there? Now, for the developing apps here, as I mentioned, for the Japan game makers, there have been complaints and questions on how to counter their dominance, right? And they've been providing inconsistent app store guidelines. And it's unpredictable in terms of its content decision, meaning sometimes they would say, we would allow this, then would change their mind and would not allow it all of a sudden. Now, obviously, if there's uncertainty in any decision making, it makes it difficult for developers here to create a game. Then what if you were to create a game based on the prescribed guidelines that you mentioned earlier, then you were to shift or change your mind later on? Then obviously Apple gets to dictate the terms because they're the one in charge. Now, should they be in charge in the first place? Because if you're Apple, you should be monetizing it, yes, but should you be the one be in charge, or let someone be in charge of taking care of how App Store is? Like in the case of Google, right? Google is able to communicate with their developers much easier, right? If they have a problem with the App Store there, they can always create their own app outside of the Google App Store, right? And make it easier, right? And it's opened a lot of can of worms for Apple. And wouldn't it be nice that they were able to communicate to all developers that this is the prescribed guidelines, this is what we want, you follow this, and then that's it, right? Everyone's happy at the end of the day. But obviously, Apple's now being singled out, and they're the only one benefiting from this, while the consumers are losing, right? The perception that you're charging more, then the developers are clamoring for your downfall, and so that is our downfall, but for better regulation and so forth. That's why Apple, Google, Amazon, they're in this antitrust issue because of their monopoly or duopoly in their case here, right? And a good example here is Square Enix, right? 40% of their revenue is on the online games here. So Bandai Namco is another. They have roughly 700,000 developers. That's a lot of people. So if there's no inconsistency here, they can affect the bottom line, especially for a startup creator. And you can see here that there's another issue where creators or developers or publishers have to borrow money from another company, but it's another topic altogether. And this is a very lucrative industry. It generates almost $40 billion in revenue, right? And as I mentioned, how come Android doesn't get as much notoriety in terms of its interaction with its developers? I think that's something Apple should try to implement or adopt. Otherwise, this is not going well for them, right? Especially with what happened in the stock market, the almost 200. I think I lost audio again. Anyway, So for some local news, uh, now obviously we've been talking about a lot of business, trying to shift their strategy because of the uh, changing behavior of the customer, sorry to say. But one of the key sectors here are having a difficulty combating not just the pandemic, but the global economy, so to speak. In particular is our manufacturing sector. Now they're asking for, you know, better regulation to protect the interests of the local manufacturers. Obviously, being global, being able to deal with other nations, other companies, that provide goods and services here is a good thing, right? Becomes a smaller world or worldwide. But the problem here is if there's no tariffs, which what the government did, it enabled other nations, which companies are being subsidized to reduce the cost even lower, which in effect neutralizes the capability of our companies that manufactures products, goods, and services, you know, null and void. So what are they supposed to do? To the point that they're barely surviving. Only the big successful multinationals are able to compete, but for the small who are trying to survive and grow at the same time are having a very difficult time. So where is it? There we go. So we can see here that the safeguard measures that they have removed is definitely have a tremendous effect on the manufacturing sector, right? So because of the anti-dumping laws as mentioned, the price below fair market value, they're able to do that because nations in other countries are subsidizing those companies so they can reduce the cost significantly, and which would in turn make our products, which is locally produced, become more expensive, right? When was that? When we have come to the point that products that are made locally become more expensive, and should we combat that as well by subsidizing our manufacturing sector as well to help improve the situation as well, right? That's why I think it's important that government or regulators in this case should, look for or review their policies, whether it needs to be reviewed, whether they need to impose tariffs on certain industries so that we can protect our local industry, especially for our great country that it is. We're supposed to be abundant in being able to plant rice, plant crops, and so forth, but we're relying on import from other countries. We should be exporting what is abundant in our nation rather than import it from other countries, which is costing us millions and millions of pesos, right? And the campaign, as mentioned based on the article, is buy local, go local, which is a admirable aim. I mean, I think the last item that I bought, that was last year, which is made local. It was, I think, made from Marikina, a dress shoe that I use for formal occasions. So it's something that I would like to do, but obviously it's a case-to-case basis. But for the bigger industries, let's say for rice, for other crops, right? So if we can protect those farmers that manufactures rice, other products that I think the government can see a benefit. Not just that, we can also take a look at the medical equipment, especially during this pandemic, right? If we can produce those personal protective equipment that generates, we need 60 million units of that, and if we can produce that locally, so we don't have to import it from other countries, we have to be self-reliant so that if another pandemic, hopefully not, but if that were to occur, that we should be reliant and self-reliant, be able to support our own needs. So it's especially in the medical field. So for medical grade coveralls, so we can produce 3.2 million. So that's a big industry that that's something the government needs to take a look at. For ventilators, there's 6 million units. Yeah, 6,000. Sorry, 6,000. 6 million, not 6,000, sorry. And infrared thermometers here. So again, hopefully the government is listening and should take a look at in terms of how to protect our domestic market here. It's not just the manufacturer, I think in other industries as well here. Continuing with our government. Now, obviously, energy is a crucial part in our daily life. It powers our cars, it powers our houses, our equipments, our appliances, everything, from everything that we do. But the problem here is the electricity that generates the power is based from coal power, right? Which is not environmentally friendly and can be toxic, right? Creates carbon dioxide. So what is the government planning to do here to find an alternative? Can you guess what? They're using, they're planning to revive the nuclear power option. And good thing, based on the article, it says it's unlikely that we'll be able to implement this by 2029, which is 9 or even 10 years away from now. Now, why are they considering this? Obviously, looking for a better alternative to coal. Now, are there other viable alternatives here aside from coal? Well, there are, but let's take a look first in the article here. So, where is it? So, where is it? There you go. Yeah. Obviously, we haven't had nuclear power here. I think there was Bataan nuclear power plant, but it was shut down already. But I think history should serve as a good lesson, right? With what happened in Fukushima, as well as what happened in Chernobyl, right? That with good intentions, on the downside, catastrophe is waiting to happen. If a nation like Japan, which is a developed nation at that are really good, very meticulous in the process in everything that they do, it took a disaster, a calamity that would destroy the nuclear power plant here. What more in our developing country like ours, right? Are we even ready to take up this monumental task of creating a nuclear power plant? Now, the potential is big, right? An alternative to fossil fuel. But what's at stake here? Where are you going to create the plant here? And if the worst case scenarios were to happen, you're going to cut costs, which don't you think government tends to do, especially in construction? Construction of buildings, and if you were to do that here in a nuclear power plant, it could be disastrous at biblical proportion, right? But I think there's optimists here. If they're trying to look at, power alternatives or energy alternatives, why not look at something that is more viable, that is readily abundant here in our backyard? And obviously, you have solar power, so we can look for flat fields, open fields, and especially during summer, we can accumulate a lot of solar power there. And then there's also wind, so along the coastlines, and then you also have hydro, right? So you have a lot of alternatives. I think the government should encourage people to invest in other technologies here, so that if we're really looking for an alternative here for other than fossil fuel, then that's a noble act that we can consider here. Okay, and finally, for our last story, so before we conclude, now, obviously, holidays is around the corner. Now, it would be different compared to previous years. But before we reach to that point, so All Saints Day here, right? What do we do? What do we normally do in All Saints Day? Now, obviously, in other countries, they celebrate this as a Halloween costume party. But in our country, we do things differently, right? And how do we do it differently? We visit our loved ones, right? We go to the cemeteries and stay there for the entire day, right? But with the pandemic that's going on, our beloved Mayor Isko Moreno, is stating that all cemeteries will be closed during the All Saints Day. So the period will be prescribed between October 31st to November the 3rd. Okay? So if you're planning to visit during All Saints Day period, well, think again. Okay? So you will not be allowed, or we will not be allowed to visit during those periods. But as mentioned, you can visit before then. Okay? Obviously, the purpose of restricting people going to their loved ones in the cemeteries is because of the pandemic that's happening, right? Now, what they will allow is the interment during those periods, as well as the cremation are allowed. Okay? Now, one thing to note that the mayor was stating that may be of interest to everyone, which is unlikely to occur, but based on what do you call this? Based on what he was saying, that there are a lot of people that are going to to Manila North Cemetery as well as South. So North proximity has a there are a lot of people visiting. There are roughly a little over 100,000. Then for South, there's 39, roughly about 40,000. Is that right? I think it's the wrong data. I no, no, sorry. Here, visitors, what I meant was 1.5 million visitors for the North Cemetery and 800,000 for the South Cemetery. So, you want to avoid people, congregating in one small proximity, right? And one thing that I was mentioning earlier that, if a vaccine were to be available before then he might change his mind. But that's unlikely to happen because as you may have seen, that many companies are still in stage 2 or going to stage 3 in the trial phase of creating a viable vaccine to combat the coronavirus here. Well, we can always hope, right? But in any case, for the meantime, what is clear is that, people who are doing business during All Saints Day, selling candles and whatnot, food, snacks, and so forth, you will not be able to do that for the foreseeable future. Maybe next year, right? But, this is what it is. We have to adjust with the situation, right? And I think that's it, right? So, thanks again for watching. So, if you have any questions or you want to check out any of the topics that we've discussed here today, I leave in the link in the description below. Now, also, don't forget to hit the notification bell icon so you can stay updated with the latest news as well as videos. You can also check my other videos. So you can go to the video library here and check out my other videos. And also, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next week, same time, same channel. Take care.